Okay, so today we are going to start solving word problems using right triangle trigonometry. But before we can begin solving word problems, we need to talk about two different types of angles: angles of elevation and angles of depression. Angles of elevation and depression are created by essentially line of sight. So here we have a gentleman on the right, and his normal line of sight is this horizontal right here. And when he looks down at this ladybug, he's creating an angle between his original line of sight and his new line of sight. And since he's looking down, we call that an angle of depression. Whereas if we look at it from the ladybug's perspective, she has a line of sight that is at this horizontal. But when she looks up at this guy, she has a new line of sight, and since she's looking up, this angle that is created is called the angle of elevation. Let's look at a couple of individual examples. For an angle of elevation, an angle is going up from a horizontal line. So here we have this little guy, and he's looking up at this airplane. Well, his normal line of sight is down here. But when he looks up, he's creating an angle. And since it's created when he's looking up, we call it an angle of elevation. The angle of depression is the angle going down from a horizontal line. So here we have this little eyeball, and its normal line of sight is this horizontal right here. And there's an object down here. So when the eyeball looks down to the object, it has a new line of sight, and the angle that's created from the horizontal to the new line of sight, then since the object is down, we call it an angle of depression. So let's look at a couple of examples and decide if this is an angle of elevation or depression. Here we have a triangle, and we can see in the picture they already drew the right triangle for us. We have right triangle ABC. And the lighthouse's horizontal is up here, and the ship is down here at A. So when the lighthouse is looking at the ship, an angle is created right here. So what kind of angle would that be since the lighthouse is looking down at the ship? That would be an angle of depression. The lighthouse is looking down at the ship, and that makes an angle of depression. Let's look at this example. We have a gentleman down here at point A, and even though his eyeballs are up here, this right here is his original line of sight from A to C. And he is looking up to the top of that tree. Well, since this is his normal line of sight, and he's looking up to the top of the tree, there's an angle that's created right here marked by X. And that angle is an angle of elevation. The person is looking up at the top of the tree. The X marks the angle of elevation. Let's look at this example. We don't have anybody down here, but we can imagine that if we're down here on the sidewalk and we're looking at this tower, our original line of sight is this horizontal right here going towards the base of the tower. But if I wanted to look up at the top of the Eiffel Tower, then I would be creating an angle right in here. And this angle is called an angle of elevation. We would look up to the top of the tower, creating an angle of elevation. This concept is fairly straightforward. It just depends on where your line of sight originally is and whether or not you're looking up or whether or not you're looking down. So for these next word problems, we just need to take that into consideration and be careful and make sure that we understand where our perspective is.